Hello, everyone. This is Kelly Eversole, the Executive Director of the International Alliance for Phytobiomes Research, or the Phytobiomes Alliance is a little easier to pronounce. And we're very pleased to be joined today by Benjamin Kwasi Addom from the Commonwealth Secretariat. But before we go to Benjamin, I'm going to give you a short overview of the Phytobiomes Alliance. We are a nonprofit consortium of industry, academic, and governmental scientists. And our sponsors actually make it possible for us to have these webinars and also to try to advance the science of phytobiomes research. So what is phytobiomes? So if we think about it, phyto as a plant and biome as a space, it's really the complex systems of plant-based agriculture. And it includes all of the physical, geophysical, and biological components that interact with that. And it also includes and is impacted by management practices that farmers use. So our idea is to really understand all of these components and try to make the most sustainable system based on that. Our vision is that by 2050, all farmers will have the ability to use predictive and prescriptive analytics based on the geophysical and biological conditions for determining the best combination of crops, management practices, and inputs for a specific field in any given year. And because we want all farmers, that's one of the reasons that we invited Benjamin today, because he will be talking with us about smallholders. And I think it's critically important that we remember that it's not just about the large farmers, it's also the small farmers that have to have these tools for sustainability. I also want to remind everyone that we will be having a Phytobiomes conference that will cover the full breadth of phytobiomes research in September of 2022. Sorry for got the wrong slide there. The registration and call for abstracts will be opening soon, but it will be in 2022. And I also want to mention that our next webinar will be at the end of June, so at the end of this month, and discussing crop condition and soil moisture analytics, some of the global information system applications that are being developed to help growers, but also we hope that will be very useful for agricultural research purposes. So just a reminder, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Phytobiomes Alliance YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. You can subscribe to the channel to never miss a new upload. The presentation section will be followed by a Q&A period. And if you have questions, please submit your questions in the Q&A panel. You can also use the chat to monitor, to see messages from the organizers or to also communicate with the organizers. Already you should be able to download both my presentation and the presentation from Benjamin if you go into the handout panel. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Benjamin Kwasi Addom and thank him again for his willingness to be here today to talk about framing smallholder digital agriculture. Benjamin?
Thank you, Kelly and the team. And it's an opportunity to be part of this. Yeah, I hope you can see my screen. Right, Kelly, can you see my screen?
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, good. So thank you for the opportunity to share our work at the Commonwealth Secretariat. And I hope I'll be able to use the next 25-30 minutes, and then from there we'll have discussion about the topic. So I'll be talking about framing smallholder digital agriculture. This is my presentation outline. I'll give you a quick background to the topic. Then I'll go to the framing of like smallholder digital agriculture. And then I mentioned that I'll deep dive a bit into agricultural data infrastructure and some policy implications. So the background. So I work for an organization called the Commonwealth Secretariat. For those who don't know, it's an intergovernmental organization that supports its member states, 54 member states in Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. And we do all kinds of work from development to democracy to peace issues. Then I work within the Commonwealth Secretariat. I work within a program, a flagship program called the Commonwealth Connectivity Agenda, CCA, Commonwealth Connectivity Agenda. The program aims to boost trade and investment across the Commonwealth countries. And it has 5 clusters: physical connectivity, digital connectivity, regulatory connectivity, supply side connectivity, and business to business connectivity. So I'm leading the supply side connectivity, and the supply side connectivity focuses on global value chain, the agriculture and fisheries, and how trade can help the Commonwealth countries with agriculture and fisheries. So the supply side connectivity, what we are doing is focusing on 3 stakeholder groups: the member state government. So a lot of policy issues here where we try to focus on data, agricultural data infrastructure. What is the role of government, in our type of, especially not in Europe, especially, but we're focusing on the small states and low development countries, so that we can advise governments to take some lead in digital agriculture infrastructure. I will explain this later. And then we also focus on micro, small, and medium enterprises. With them, we're trying to support them with business development services to build back after the pandemic. And then the third stakeholder group are the farmers and fishers association. So they are the doers on the ground. So how do we connect them across the Commonwealth to share experiences, to support the flow of input and output across? We trying to engage all kinds of stakeholders, partners. So if you're interested, feel free to contact me at the end of this, and we will see how to work together with you. Before joining Commonwealth Secretariat this year, basically January this year, I worked for an organization called CTA, the Technical Center for Agriculture and Rural Cooperation, based in the Netherlands. And one of the last activities that we carried out before, unfortunate closure of the organization was this report. I don't know how many of you have seen or have read it, the Digitalisation of African Agriculture. The link is up here. That you can also search for it. If you search for the Digitalisation of African Agriculture report, you come across. So we work together with Dalbeck advisors, and we try to understand what was happening in the continent of Africa at that time between 2018 and 2019. What is the state of digital agriculture? And we came out with a lot of findings. You can read the report, but this my talk is based on part of the report. So within that report, we define digitalization for agriculture, or D for Ag, as the use of digital technologies, innovations, data, business models, and practices across the ag value chain. And since the release of this report, I've been trying to think, and what is it? What is, if you are talking of digital ag, what is it? And that is what is leading me to talk about this framework. So I'm taking it from this definition, but expanding on it in the framework. So within the framework, you will see technologies, innovations, business models, practices, and all those things, data. So the framework. So I have two statements. The framework, even though it's being applied to the agricultural or fishery sector, I believe that is very generic and can be applied to, health, education, governance, any sector. So you can take it as digitalization for development, not only for agriculture. So if you take off the agricultural part, you can put health, education, governance, climate, anything to see. So it's very generic. The second statement is that the framework is also taking a national approach. I'm thinking of, maybe because of where I am working, we focus on member states. I'm thinking of a macro perspective instead of focusing on one application, one system, one platform, that is being promoted in Kenya or Burkina Faso or, any country. Taking a national perspective, a macro perspective for us to understand digital agriculture. So the framing, if you look at the slide, this is what I refer to as the agricultural component. So if you take off this, you can replace this with, if you are a health expert, you can replace this with that. What are you trying to do within the health sector? What are you trying to do to improve and transform and, facilitate access to health data? You can replace it with education. What is it that your organization or you as an individual expert, what are you doing? So within the agricultural sector, at smallholder farmer level, these are some of the things that we've been grappling with. For those working within the agricultural sector, you can attest to the fact that the climate change is affecting us. So we're trying to build climate resilience for the farmers. Production, yield of farmers is decreasing, and because of that, income is going down. So we're trying to increase this, and also access to finance is another thing. Then the inclusion of women and youth into the agricultural value chain. All these are critical things, issues that we trying to address at smallholder farmer level. So I put it as at the impact level. And then at macro level, the blue ones are the inclusive growth, basically trying to ensure that everybody is part of it, financial, women, and youth. And then the green part has to do with sustainable food and nutrition security. So to transform smallholder agriculture at smallholder farmer level, we look at this, and then at macro level, global level, we look at these two sides. So now I'm going to go to the framework, which should be applicable to any other sector. So the framework has 4 components. I'll take you through the 4 components. The first one is digital innovations. And digital innovations, I subdivided it into digital solutions and digital technologies. There are some terms here, controversial, people, but this is how I'm framing it. So the solutions are the one that interfaces with the users. So the smallholder farmer is not going to use AI, machine learning, drones, blockchains, and others. No, the smallholder farmer is going to use the app on the phone that is giving advice on production extension services, market linkage, credit and loans and supply chains, and all kinds of things. So these are the solutions and the services. The technologies are at the back end, and everybody is talking about digital technologies. And for some of us, that's not the language for the smallholder farmer. It's my language. It's the language for the tech guys, the development organizations. But when we get to the smallholder farmer, we need to speak their language. So the technologies are the ones that facilitate access to the services and the solutions. So for the extension and advisory app or platform to work, you need some AI, machine learning, you need to use maybe drones to capture data, you need to have some blockchain technologies behind for this. So digital innovations subdivided into solutions and services, and then the technologies. Then the second component of the framework is also subdivided into two, which look at content and identity. So content and identity. So for you, if you have an extension and advisory services app, you need data, right? You need content. Otherwise, you'll be sending spam messages to farmers that are not relevant. So you need the right content, like weather data, you need market data, you need soil data, agronomic data about the crops that the farmers are growing, financial data to be able to advise on credit and loans. You need this data for the services to work. And to be frank with you, you need these technologies to capture some of this data to make it work. So you see, you can't do without them. And then the second part of the data infrastructure is the user data. Is the user data. The user data is if you don't know me, you can't send me the right content, right? If I'm located here in London, and if you are marketing something which is not relevant to me and you send it to me, I just throw it in trash, just remove it. But if you know where I'm located, the north of London, and you know that, oh, I like this, then you target and send me messages that is relevant for me to look for it. So you need user data. You need user data, which is either individual or institutions. If you're trying to target banks or credit unions and all kinds of things, you need to know who they are, what they do, where their location is, to be able to target them and connect them to those who need their services, right? So the data infrastructure also has two components, the content and the identity. And this data infrastructure is what I refer to as digitization, not digitalization. So the digitization is moving from analog to digital, where what we used to do, I used to be extension officer in Ghana. And what we were doing was paper and pen, right? You go to the field, capture data, carry out training with farmers, and put on data. You come back in Excel sheet and all kinds of papers. Nowadays, we are using apps. So all this data moving from analog to digital is digitization. And most people confuse this and they interchangeably use digitization and digitalization. The whole of this that I'm explaining is what I refer to as digitalization. But just the data component here, describe the digitization component, which can be applied to any component of your organization. You can decide to digitize your health or educational data. Okay, now let's go to the third component of the framing. The third component is business development, and this is the one that we normally forget about it because we think that is for the donors and government and NGOs, but we need to think of who is paying for these services, right? Who is paying for the technologies, the solutions and the services, the data gathering, the content and all those things. Is it the government? Is it the users themselves, donors? And what kind of financing is going in? Is it grant or subsidies? Is it for profit? If we don't look at this very well, that leads to the short-lived nature of our project. At the end of the project, there's no business model and the project dies down, and farmers benefit for some time and they don't have access to it again. So the business development component is key, who is looking at these apps, who is seeing value to continue investing in it. We need to look at that. Then the last component is the enabling environment, which is down here. Normally, I refer to this as both digital and non-digital. Okay, it's not just digital infrastructure, and it's also both agricultural and non-agricultural. So if you say digital, you can talk about cell towers as digital infrastructure. But at the same time, you need to think of roads, right? If you use digital platforms to support farmers to increase production, farmers, and you are linking them to market, they need to have access to roads. If they are landlocked somewhere, they need to find way of going through the river or the sea to sell. So you need the right infrastructure in place, which is the enabling environment for these ones to work. You need the right policies, which are either agricultural policies or digital policies. You need issues of literacy and skills. You need to train the smallholder farmer, even the entrepreneurs. They need the right skills to develop the right tools to support. Then the whole issue of business ecosystem that allows import and export of products relating to the agricultural and digital, and all the regulations that are put in place to allow this to work. You need to take them into consideration. And then the last part has to do with knowledge and networking, all the reports that we are producing, if capacity building activities and databases. There are hundreds of databases being developed for apps, and the writing needs to be done for this one to work. Most of the time, people focus on this side, the digital innovations. So because of that, there are hundreds of apps, and everybody is focusing on this. And now with the technologies, and now there's this big issue of data sharing, because we've not actually planned for it. So for all this to work, we need the right enabling environment. So this is the framing. This is basically the framing of the smallholder digital agriculture. And for where I work, we have separated agriculture from fisheries. So you can replace this right-hand side with fisheries issues and other things. And then see the role of digitalization in transforming the sector. So based on what I just explained, it's clear that digital agriculture or digitalization for agriculture, it's not the same as digital agricultural solutions. So digital agricultural solutions is just a small component here, but most of the time people just talk digital solutions can transform agriculture. We need to think at macro level. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that digital solutions are not good. There are a lot of them that are doing excellent work, but if you don't link it to data, to business, to the enabling environment, it's short-lived. It doesn't have the right impact on the smallholder farmer. Now I'll move to the agricultural data infrastructure and policy implications. So the report that I referred to at the beginning that we produced at CTA, one of the recommendations we gave was the missing middleware. Invest in the missing middleware infrastructure. And what is it? What is this? So this is also from the report. I want to give you the background again. So the report for Africa, these are some of the findings that in West Africa alone, in West Africa countries alone, we found about 162 apps or platform and systems supporting agriculture. And if you go to East Africa alone, about 146, platforms, apps, and solutions focusing on agriculture, with over 21 million farmers or users registered, whilst in West Africa, over 4.3 million registered users, Central Africa and Southern Africa. So you can imagine the situation, right? You can imagine 146 platform solutions all trying to reach the same farmer. For example, this is the example of Kenya. So you go to Kenya and advisory service platforms, market linkage platforms, financial access platforms, supply chain management, macro, and you see hundreds of these, apps all in Kenya. Okay. And all these are reaching the same farmers. They are trying to sell their solutions to the same farmers, whether you are, at, providing extension and advisory services or market linkage. So you can imagine what the smallholder farmers are going through. The duplication. So the data infrastructure that I explained earlier as the second component of the framework, this is the picture that we see now at national level, at country level. So these are examples of the apps and the platforms at the country level. So for example, if you know of Hello Tractor, Hello Tractor is a platform, is a solution that connects tractor, those who need tractor, to those who have tractor. So using Internet of Things, some gadgets connected to the tractor to be able to capture data and connect those who have interest in tractor. So Hello Tractor is building data infrastructure by building content to be able to know who has, who needs this. At the same time, they have data on the users. They are building profile of users all across, for example, in Kenya. If you take DigiFarm, another platform, the same thing. They're also registering farmers in their database. At the same time, they may be having, weather data platform, soil maps, and market data. If you go to iCow, that is trying to support cattle farmers, the same thing. So you see the duplication of data being built by all this. And as I said earlier, they are not willing to share data among themselves. So I refer to this as multiple spokes with no hub. So the hub is empty and everyone is doing its own thing. This is the current situation that we have in terms of data, agricultural data infrastructure in our parts of the world. No hub. This is an alternative option that I'm thinking, where our national government play a role in building the hub. Okay, so they build a hub. The spokes still have their services and their individual private data that they generate. But imagine Kenyan government is able to register all farmers in Kenya and then build the soil maps of agricultural soil map in Kenya, has weather station across and has market data, has agronomic data on the crops that are grown in Kenya, has a huge database of this. If Hello Tractor is coming to Kenya, if DigiFarm, if Aware is coming to Kenya, they don't have to repeat building those infrastructure. They have something already that the generic that they will write on, and then build their services, reducing the cost of investment for these private sector service providers. This is a model that I think it's very controversial, and I know people, while people like it, people disagree with me. So I'm willing to have a chat with anybody. But this is a model that I think if Kenya has this, Uganda has this, Malawi, Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, and these hubs are now connected, you can imagine, the kind of data that will be generated across, the kind of agricultural data that can be generated for policy and decision making to support our government. So that is it. So if going back to the framework, my argument is that if we work on the framework, we will be able to use the framework to assess and track and compare the resilience of, countries to be able to leverage this digital innovations, digital technology, or digitalization into the agricultural sector. It will enable us, to know which country is leading. I was on a World Bank webinar recently, and an official from one of the countries in Africa said, we are the lead when it comes to digital agriculture. And in my mind, I said, what is the criteria? What indicators? Basically, I waited, and then I heard him saying, because we have this number of digital solutions. And it's just using one indicator to argue that they are the lead. It's not looking at the business or the enabling environment, policies in place, or the data infrastructure in place. It's just the number of digital solutions, not even the technologies. So if we don't have this kind of framework, we will mislead ourselves with such kind of statement that Ghana is the lead, Nigeria is the lead, just based on one indicator. So I believe that a framework like this, which should take a multi-stakeholder approach, not only Commonwealth Secretariat developing, can help us monitor, track, and assess what is happening within the sector. And then this is my last slide on the data infrastructure, as I was saying. So imagine what I described if we are able to convince and guide and help our national government to be able to do that hub, and then countries maintain this, or they maintain this database of this agricultural, both the content and the user data, and then these are connected. It has a lot of implication, privacy issues, of course, but it's possible. Imagine these are connected from Australia to Mexico to Canada to Africa about agricultural data. You can imagine the kind of decisions, policy decisions that we can make. We will not depend on, random statements, ad hoc statements from people that because of pandemic, this is having, impact on agricultural sector. With just, maybe one survey data without, right, background data. So what I'm saying is, if we are able to take advantage of the national data infrastructure, if we are able to, if governments can take lead and build that hub, and these hubs are now connected across, then we have a big picture. That's what we call big data. So you have big data and you have analytics, you have things, decisions that you can make for the sector to grow. So based on that, I will end my presentation and open it up for discussion, and I'll hand over to Kelly.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. That's really interesting. So the questions are coming in, and I think we can discuss a number of the issues and points that you've raised. The first one is, what is your method, or how do you plan on getting government support for the digital for ag infrastructure, or the framework by country?
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that. The challenge, I mean, based on my experience, the challenge is to make it work in one country, right? If you want to convince other government to adopt and use it, you need to prove the case. So the challenge is to prove the case at one place, and that is what we need to do. And as I said, it's not something that one institution should put on his or her shoulder, but it should be a partnership. So what we are thinking is, working with the private sector, because again, if you leave it in the hands of, the public sector, government, they will find money. Probably they will take a loan from the World Bank and build it, but they will not be able to maintain and sustain it. So you need a partnership, to invest and develop and build this infrastructure, and then bring in the business part, how to sustain this and continue generating some value out of it. So what we are trying to do for now, is from the Secretariat part, we have launched a study on the state of digital ag and digital fisheries in the Commonwealth. Once the report is out, we will know what is the state of agricultural data infrastructure in these countries. And then based on that, we are putting together working groups for each of the four pillars or the four components of the framework. And these working groups, experts, researchers, policymakers, we will work on each one of them, bring it together, come out with a number of indicators, and then develop the framework. And then, now try to test it in a country. And if it works, we scale it and sustain it. That's what we are trying to do.
All right. Do you have any advice on how the private sector can engage with the governments who may not have the resources or the background to cooperate towards this?
Yeah, so that is one big issue, the private sector and the government and NGOs, donors and all those things. So for me, what I do talk about is a kind of phased investment, PHASEED, phased investment. The innovations are expensive and risky, right? So if you call the private sector to come in first and do that, you're not going to get it. The donors and the foundations, they have money to do that because they are looking for statistics. They want some numbers to report that we are having, we are reaching the poor and all those things. So they have the grants and subsidies, right? So you need to partner with the donors and the foundations to first de-risk these innovations. Once you do that, once they put in some grant initially, working with governments and MSME startups on the ground to do this, then you have a case. You start proving some of these cases. Once you do that, then government will see the benefit that can, and then the government will provide that enabling environment to attract the private sector now to come and scale. So if you call the private sector direct to come and invest in something like this, you're not going to get it. You need to prove to them that it makes business sense. Already they will tell you that agricultural sector is risky. They would like to put money in entertainment and all kinds of things. So that is the kind of phased investment of financing that I talk about. So we need to national governments need to work with the donors to first, de-risk the innovation. Once that is done, and it takes time. This takes time. We don't need to rush. It takes time. There are a lot going on the ground already. A lot of de-risking taking place. And so once that is done, then the government now open up, partner with the private sector to come in, and NGOs are there to help and facilitate. And so that kind of partnership is what I don't have an example to share, but I believe it's possible. We did something like that when I was working at CTA. We tried, because CTA were not a donor, but we had some grants and we tried. But the mistake we did was we didn't plan it. So we went ahead and did the de-risking, but we were not ready for the private sector investment. So if you don't plan with the private sector, by the time you finish with your what we call proof of concept or pilot, by the time you finish with that, you may not be able to get the private sector to come in and invest and scale. But if you work with them, by the time you finish your pilot, your proof of concept project, they are ready to do the analysis, look at the results and start scaling up.
All right. You mentioned in terms of a pilot or having one country where you may have success. And I noticed the difference in uptake of digital solutions between East Africa and Western Africa, even South Africa. Where are you targeting perhaps East Africa because there's more digital users in East Africa?
So the market from the graph that I shown, that shows the divide within the report. What we notice from that is the East Africa countries are a bit ahead. That's why you see the West has more solutions. If you look at the map, the West has more solutions, but they have less users. The East has less solutions, but has more users. And our interpretation of that was that there are a lot of new ones emerging in West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and all those things, Burkina Faso, the French-speaking countries. Even though they are late, they are behind. There are a lot of these startups that are coming with new innovations. So because they are new, they are young, they don't have more users. East Africa, they have more established ones that have millions of users. And when I say users, we refer to them as registered users, basically the number of farmers that they have in their database. It doesn't mean that they are actually using the service, right? They register them, some are just there and they are not using it. So yes, the opportunity is there, both East and West. The Sahel region of Africa, they are lagging behind. The southern part, the opportunity is there as well, but we didn't have enough data from the southern part. But it doesn't mean that they don't. But Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and all those things, they have Malawi, they are doing a lot in that area. So not necessarily targeting one area, but left to me alone, if I with this activity at the Commonwealth, if I will need to pilot, I will probably not start with Africa. I may probably start with, the Caribbean or the Pacific. It's better to start with a small country, to see a result quickly than to go to Nigeria where, the landscape is huge and it's difficult to manage a national activity like this.
Yeah. So I was, just in terms of the so-called registered users, at least in my experience of seeing the technologies that are coming out by startups and the digital technologies that are being provided, not only in agriculture, but in healthcare and a number of different areas. The mobile banking has certainly driven a lot of that because people are accustomed to having everything on their cell phone, for example.
Yeah.
Is there a difference in the different countries between the cell phone usage? I don't know those statistics immediately, but
yeah, I don't have that statistics as well, but definitely the mobile usage is higher than the web and others, the computer usage and all those things. So the report that we produced, we didn't deep dive into the details of infrastructure, basically the handset connectivity. We just focus on the platforms and the solutions. But GSMA has been doing a lot of work in that area, and it's clear that mobile penetration is taking lead, just out pacing the use of computer and all others, because everybody has that handset now, even though they may not be smartphones, but they have feature phones. They are receiving their text messages and all other things. So yes, that is true.
Yeah, so this whole concept of a data platform or collaborative data has been a challenge, in places like Europe and in the United States. Certainly, there are a number of different efforts where they're trying to collaborate or to bring data together. And even from the standpoint of the Phytobiomes Alliance, one of our goals has been to, can we develop a database that the public and private sector can utilize while protecting intellectual property, protecting IDs, preventing the wrong people from getting access to it, et cetera. And even that has been a challenge. And I think one of the things that we face in agriculture, as opposed to some of the other fields, is that we're not as accustomed to working together on a pre-competitive basis. Sharing data and the concept of sharing data is not something in ag business that is prevalent anywhere. And so it brings a totally different sort of challenges.
Yeah.
The other aspect that you mentioned is that the infrastructure may not actually be in place to support all of this. And would you not, in terms of your pilot, would need a country or a place where it is in place, you can actually see it work. I'm familiar with the efforts in the United States to make the internet available everywhere. And there are places in the United States where we don't have the infrastructure. So when you think of the economies of some of the countries, they may not have that capability. So given all of that, how are you prioritizing where you would work, and what steps are you going through? And I know you're just starting on this, so it's brand new, but just in terms of laying out what your next steps are.
No, the data sharing issue is a big one. And as you said, everybody's trying to build that database, because we've seen the value of the example that I do give all the time is that the situation that the developed nations like the US and the UK are facing now, where they had to summon, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and question them about data, because it's because of the data. That's why they call them to Senate, and talk and question. It's because of the data, right? You can imagine, the situation where a private company like Twitter or Facebook can ban a whole former president, and they can't use it, So that is the picture that I give, that if we are not careful, our agricultural data is going to be in the same situation from developing nations, because for now, as I've shown in the slide, there's no hub, and the spokes are building the data infrastructure. So we in the report that I referenced, we also talk about super platforms. So if there is emergence of super platforms, it's going to swallow all those small ones. And then once you see a super platform in Africa, then they are going to be like Google or Facebook. So once they take that, then they have captured all the data, both the user data and content data. They can take over, and then now African government will have to be begging, we need access to data, and they may not even have the ability to call this private sector to come and answer questions, So that is the picture that some of us are seeing, that if we don't take action now, it's going to result in the same situation. So it's something that we need to think of and see the role of our government to prevent what is happening in the developed nations. Can the government build that hub and have that generic data, whilst the private sector have their own data and services that they run on? And with that, they don't hold you ransom for everything, because they still need yours to be able to do some things. So it's that partnership will be there. They don't they can't just take everything away from you. So as I said, we are now working on it. The timeline is not clear yet. So, but once the studies are completed somewhere July, August, then the framework will now be developed, and then we will start working, identifying countries. We call them member states that are willing to start. We start with them and see, how we can build this. And then again, as I said at the beginning, the program I'm working on is called the Commonwealth Connectivity Agenda. The idea is to connect the member states to facilitate the flow of products for trade and investment. So once you connect them, with the agricultural data infrastructure, then it's going to facilitate the flow of implements, tools from Canada to Australia to Africa to India, Bangladesh, and produce from Trinidad to this. With that kind of data, it's easy to monitor and know what is out there, what is not there. Even in times of pandemic, you can quickly see the picture of who has what, who doesn't have what, how to collaborate and support access to some of these things. So yeah, those are the way we are looking at it. It's not clear yet, but we are looking forward to it.
So one of in a number of the data discussions that have been happening for the past 5 to 10 years, perhaps, ownership of the data becomes a key component, and ensuring that the growers actually maintain that ownership and that they actually benefit financially from some of that and the use of the data has been a critical component. Are you planning or thinking about at some point having maybe standard data ownership so that the growers actually maintain their ownership of their data?
Yeah, no, that's a big issue. That's a big issue. We work on a project in Uganda, and that was the concern from the smallholder farmers, because initially we thought they would trust the government. They said, no, we can't trust the government. Once the government have our data, they're going to tax us. We have to pay tax and all kinds of things. So the model that we used was to use the farmer associations, the farmer cooperatives, because the farmers are their member base. But you'll be surprised, they trust their members, they trust these associations because they know they represent them, they speak on their behalf. So that's a model that we can explore, not necessarily starting from government, but so if you look at my program, I talk about farmers and farmers association as one of the stakeholder groups that I'm targeting. So these are groups that need to be organized, and then the data ownership, it belongs to them. The data belongs to the farmers, not the government. So if you get them involved and they understand this, then they will be willing to share their data, release their data. And what the model we were trying in Uganda is that once the hub is built, probably let's say in Kampala, the capital of Uganda, then you have the cooperatives and associations in the districts and the regions. They are the ones that contribute the data into that hub. You can now decentralize it to them, so that a district association will only have access to their data, and they can use this. They can monetize that. They can use that to get loans, to get access to input for their cooperative, whilst the hub in Kampala can still benefit from all the spokes, in the district, in the region, and there will be understanding between the users and then the hub, the central. So it's something that we have piloted somewhere before, not fully, but that's my lesson from that. If you start with the farmer, they own the data and they understand, then it works.
So have you thought at all about looking at it from a standpoint, or starting from a standpoint of research data? I know it's been an area that I've worked in for many years, and Getting scientists to share data can be a challenge in and of itself. But perhaps that might be one way to at least have a small pilot. Can you, in a particular region, perhaps not at a country level, but even larger than that, begin, and encourage the scientists to actually share the data with protection of where the soil sample came from, or ownership protection. But have you thought at all about that? Because this is an area that we would like to really try to promote.
Yeah. No, that is the content part of the content data that I mentioned. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. When we were working on this project in Uganda, we work with the National Agricultural Research Organization, NARO.
Mhm.
And NARO is the research institute in Uganda that's in charge of research, agricultural research data. And it was easy for us to get data because we came there with project money and we were able to engage them, And then over there, it was also easy to share their data with the private sector partners that were part of the project. So we had remote sensing partners from the Netherlands and from the US. They also needed that content data from NARO to be able to map their weather data or to map their index-based insurance data onto it. And and we saw collaboration over there.
Right.
And so if scientists, if they see the value, that's I think that should be the key. If they see the value, those working on soils, those working on the specific crops, agronomic ones, the market and all those things, if they see the value, probably, they will be willing to share because there will be more value addition to the data that they are generating. It's not just going to be stored at one place. Once you work on it and analyze, you come out, new finding comes, you start using it again. So yeah, it's something that we should talk about if we can explore a model like this, because we definitely need a scientist. We need all kinds of models to come in to be able to combine the soil data, agronomic data, weather data, and all those things for smallholder farmer to benefit.
I know, just from the standpoint of the phytobiomes concept, it's a very complex, multidisciplinary concept. And even within that, it's difficult to get the weather scientists to work with soil scientists. I mean, it's a challenge, and we still have a lot to move forward on. So you mentioned, and this will be the last question that I have for you. You mentioned the working groups, that you're establishing working groups around the 4 pillars. Are they based on the 4 pillars?
Yes.
Okay. So how does somebody actually get engaged with a working group if somebody wanted to be involved?
Yeah. So that is what we're going to work on from, I would say, from July, August, once the reports that we have launched is out, the reports are released. Then but for now, my email address is here. Anyone who is interested should contact me if you are interested in any of the pillars, whether for the digital innovations, whether for the data part, or business, or enabling environment. The enabling environment alone is huge. You can see all the classes over there. So yes, anyone who is interested, and once the pandemic is over, we will be able to meet somewhere and discuss some of these things and work on it together. So yeah, feel free to contact me, look for me on LinkedIn, and then we can connect and work on it together.
All right. Is there a mailing list that people can sign up for?
Not yet. Not yet.
We'll be looking forward to that.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Benjamin. This has been very interesting, and I think it's a critical aspect that will be necessary for us to ensure food security by 2050 and beyond that. So again, we've been joined today by Benjamin Addom from the Commonwealth Secretariat, and I hope that you'll join us again on our next webinar later this month. So that's all from the Phytobiomes Alliance today, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you for joining us.